Welcome, everyone, to the Coaching to Flourish blog. My name is John. I'm here with Ashley. Thank
Hello,
you so much
everybody.
for being a part of this community, watching, learning, being involved in the coaching movement. And I'm feeling pretty jazzed. I got to sub in for a class this morning, which always a good time. Got to meet with we had our all trainer meeting this morning as well, and just feeling like, yeah, we are changing the world. This is happening, and here we are together with Ashley, our associate provost. So here we
Woohoo.
go. Let's do this. Let's do this
Yay.
day.
Okay, I'm already curious, John. This is not one of our questions, but talk about this coaching movement. What does that mean to you?
Uh, it was so in leading the class. It was a relatively new class, and the participants were amazing. And one of the questions I like to start with when I'm subbing into a class is like, so what's been the biggest insight? What's been the biggest thing? And a lot of it comes down to listening. And it feels to me like the last, if you look at society from large bird's eye view, millennia perspective, human beings have increasingly found ways to communicate more effectively and efficiently. Language, writing, even now we have video, the technology, like the mode of speaking and communicating and listening is improving vastly. And what I feel like coaching is, it's a training in empathetic listening that is what is needed when technology has given us so much noise, so much opportunity. Like even this, like we're able to put this on, and it could show up in thousands, millions. It could just duplicate to infinity. So when that happens, then you can get even more precise in the kind of media that you take in, and the real training then is, what's that internal world like? What's listening like? And so I feel like the coaching movement is a movement in basically empathetic listening. It's listening for the sake of other, which is uh, it's in practice. It seems it doesn't seem like much, but in theory, it doesn't seem like much. But when you look at it in practice, in watching, being with a group of 8 people who are experiencing trained empathetic listening for sustained periods of time, and seeing like their introduction to that, oh, I love that. That is, I remember when I went through it. I remember the eye-opening feeling that was for me, and it is such a privilege to be able to group after group experience that with a new group of people, and then to know that they're going to go off and work with other people, go take the training to their organizations, have a client, have client bases. That this is happening and empathetic listening is increasing. That to me is the coaching movement, and it's based in curiosity, essentially. So yeah, I'm feeling jazzed, super jazzed this morning.
I love it. It's
Yeah.
awesome. That actually kind of it ties into one of the questions that we've been asked is like, what are some of the best techniques with level 2 and level 3 listening? But I think even to kind of break it down a little bit more, and I know we covered this a little bit in lives, but kind of an overview for some people that might be new here. Like, what are these levels of listening? Like, because when I bring it up with people
Mm-hmm.
outside of the coaching world, they're like, wait, what? There's levels of listening? They're like, yes. So if there's like if you can kind of give a brief description of what that is, but then
Mm-hmm.
how do we get into level 2, level 3 listening? I mean, I know we have a short amount of time right now, but what could
Yeah,
that
of
look like?
course, of course. So the levels of listening, it corresponds to persons of a verb. Okay, so first person means I or we, second person is you, and third person is they. So and this concept, it comes, I mean, it's not new to coaching. Like, this is something that has been around. I think I went down a rabbit hole trying to find the original, like, so where did levels of listening come from, and what is it? And I think they're pretty ancient. Like, I think it goes back even to some of the philosophers, and trying to put themselves in different perspectives when you're like listening to the same thing. And I was reading Harry Potter to our 5-year-old. He just got into it, and I was thinking the brilliance of the characters, and how the same thing happens. but then the characters, because of their perspectives, they see it in completely different ways, and how often that shows up in the book. And I was also relating that, thinking, oh yeah, that's a lot like levels of listening, where if you're listening to something from your first person perspective, you're asking yourself, what does this have to do with me? How do I need to respond? Can I solve this? How can I be the best help I can be? As first person. But you flip it and to second person, to listening from the sake of, perspective or sake of someone else, the same topic can be completely different. And you're asking yourself the question, how does this relate to them? What's it like to be them saying this out loud right now? And that is level 2 listening. Like if you're listening with that perspective, what's it like to be the other person? That's specifically what we mean by level 2. I call it empathetic listening because a lot of people outside the coaching world don't know what level 2 means. So empathetic listening works, but it's even more powerful than that. It's more like active, imaginative. I am imagining I'm you listening. And that's that level. And I think what it takes from new coaches, from anyone really, is it really does take the intention to listen and ask yourself, if I were this other person, what would I be most curious about? Or what would my world be like? Or what emotion would I be feeling? And it's not a logical thing. I want to get away from this idea that, let me puzzle it out, like what they're thinking. It's more listening to them as another human, and allowing your natural intuition, your natural emotion, you can trust yourself in that space. Like the work is the effort is in the mental, emotional effort to be curious, to imagine, you as them. That's the effort work. But once you're there, the listening part feels effortless. Mm-hmm. Effortless. It's even less effort than level 1 listening. After a while, that level 2 listening becomes even, becomes easier and more fun and interesting. And so, there's a lot of times when, listening level 1, just not as interesting anymore. It just feels like level 2, just get more coaching juice. Level 3 listening is listening to the other person, and also yourself, your own emotion, and asking yourself, that's an interesting emotion that I'm feeling while I'm listening to them. I'm going to make up that my feeling also is about my client. Now it gets a little tricky. It comes from this idea of listening, like, imagine that you were a third person in the room and you're listening to both people, the talker and the listener, and everything that happens in the room is about the talker, right? That's essentially where it comes from. And you have to, if you're doing this, you have to be very careful that you are confident and know what it feels like to listen level 2. Otherwise, if you're trying to listen to your own emotion as well as the person you're listening to, and you don't have that level 2 muscle built, then level 3 listening can just go back to level 1, and you're just listening to yourself again, and you can feel it. It feels flat. There's a certain energetic to it that you can pick up to pretty quickly if you listen to a lot of coaching. And that's what level 3 listening is. It's amazing. It really is. It doesn't mean that you're listening, your own emotion is right. It doesn't mean like somehow you have some insight on them, but it is fascinating when it's almost like you're using yourself as an instrument of curiosity for the sake of someone else. And when you can use yourself as that instrument, it feels to me like a generous act. Like you are allowing your imagination, your curiosity, your human emotion processor, like you're basically giving that to someone to use for, half hour, 50 minutes, whatever it is. It's generous. I mean, you're getting paid for it too, but it's work. It's not, it definitely takes effort, but the effort needs to be in the imaginative part, not into the logical, let me like puzzle it together part. That might be, that's a description of the core of coaching.
Yeah. When you think about, if somebody's listening to that and they're like, okay, so how do I put that into practice today? Like, what are a few things that they could start doing to start to implement that, like as soon as their next conversation?
Yeah, I just was, so in the training this morning, I did a practice coaching and with a client, and some of the questions that came up were, what if my client tells me asks me, what should I do? Clients come to me and they say, just give me the advice, right? And the same question, I mean, it's the same answer to both questions, which is continue to stay curious. Like if someone asks you a question about what should I do, the answer is, where is that question coming from? What's the yearning behind that question? Let's say the answer to that question were found. What would have to shift internally, or who would you need to be in order to accomplish that goal? What's the skill set you feel like is missing the most? What's the hardest thing for you to be with? Like all of these curiosity questions, just allow them to bubble up. And that's the number one thing coaches can do right away, is to catch yourself when you normally would judge, oh, this session's going bad, or I'm not doing well, or whatever that internal thing is, to catch yourself in there and just get curious. It's, I go through it too. I still go through it when I'm feeling down. I'm like, okay, I'm feeling down. Why am I feeling down? What? And then sometimes I might have to go back and go, oh yeah, it's that thing. That's, I go back in the day and realize, okay, this is where this is happening. And then get curious about it. And it really is a practice of curiosity. And then that curiosity pretty quickly leads into creativity. And I think that's what we're finding is the act of judgment will shut down creativity very quickly. Like even in the trainer meeting, I roll out a concept, and we all jump off in groups of two and coach each other. It's a way to connect, and it's one of my favorite things. And they come back, and some of the people say, "Well, I went the exact opposite way of the concept," and I could say, "Oh, I could judge myself and go, oh, I'm missing it out. Maybe I didn't describe it well enough, or whatever." But then what they got from it is what they needed to get from it. And so then there's an element of, okay, I can judge this and feel certain feelings, or I can stay in curiosity and continue to provide value. That's the coaching decision. It's that juncture of I'm going to judge or I'm going to stay in curiosity. There's road work happening and on our street, and it seems like my daughter has a track meet to get to. She's in districts, and it's a big deal. She's in 6th grade. And we were going to have a delivery happen, but the delivery people just turned around. As soon as they saw the roadblock, bloop, turned around, took off. It's not going to happen. Sadness. And then Moise goes up there and says, let me figure this out. What's happening? She goes and asks the people. And they say, oh, no big deal. We can just put this big metal plate over it, and it takes us 30 seconds. Not a big deal. Sorry for the whatever, and that's staying curious. When you see the roadblock, you stay curious, not immediately accept defeat and turn around and just go away. And that's the coaching process. That's what coaches can do. Like right now, the hardest thing in your life. And then you notice how much judgment you have in it. I'm doing it too right now. I'm thinking of the hardest thing. Cool. And then you stay curious. Ask it a question. and then another one. Essentially, the coaching process is someone is there with you, holding your hand, doing that with you, and that's to me is it's beautiful. I feel like it it matters. It's a new way of connecting, and I think this is going to be the future of education and human interaction. This will be a part of it. I know it just because it's so fulfilling.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool, John. And I love like the things you're talking about too, are we're looking at it from a coach client perspective, but also I hear continuously from coaches in our community how it's transforming their relationships outside of their client coach relationships as well, and bringing this curiosity that you're talking about and empathetic listening into their relationships with their family and their friends, and what happens there too. And so even today, if you're finding like you don't have a client that you're working with, how can you bring this into I mean, you're going to have a conversation with somebody today. So how do you bring that into that space, and really allow yourself to get to another space with somebody? I just think it's pretty magical even in that. Like, some of the conversations I've been able to have with my mom that are just so different now, and that changes, I'm sure, as being an adult now. but when her and I both have more curiosity in our conversations, where we are able to get, as opposed to if we're coming both from this place of already perceived judgment or assumptions or things like that. And sometimes it's just silence too, and like allowing a space after something said to just settle for a second and then be able to think through really what just happened, and then bring a question or bring thought process. And I don't know, so it just made me think of that too. I'm like, man, it like the client coach relationship is what we're talking about, but there is a spillover into everything else, every other interaction that we have. And it's really, really cool.
It just keeps going. I mean, that's the thing with curiosity. It it gains its own momentum, and
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a habit, and it really does filter through all areas of someone's life.
Yeah, it helps you feel seen personally, and it helps somebody else feel seen when we bring
Right.
curiosity. So we see ourselves and we see others with that curiosity.
That's so cool. And I mean, mother parent relationships is some of the hardest stuff to to address sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not that and I think you have to be careful too sometimes not to approach these relationships like with your coach hat on. That's different than bringing like listening. When I first started the coaching program, I was definitely doing that. I was like, yeah, this is not. I
Yeah.
think my friends want me to be a friend right now.
I think everyone goes through that puppy stage. I know I did. I went through
Mhm.
my coaching puppy stage where I thought, this is amazing. Let me do it. I was teaching at the time, so it was totally like I had captive audiences. It's amazing.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, there's a working through that. That was so good, John. Okay, the next question is, what are some tools for habit change?
Yeah. Habit change is a big deal. This is one of the things I think is it is hard. Some habits are extremely hard. I was thinking of one where I had a really sweet structure that got me to the gym 3 times a week, and then it went away.
Mm.
And now I struggle to get to the gym once a week is good for me. I'm like, oh my goodness, what has happened? And then I'm looking for ways to build that structure back in. And for me, the key is structure. Like it's too challenging to rely on willpower or motivation or that inner push. I mean, that inner decision is. I mean, it has to be. There is always a decision point involved, but I think it's about creating structures and rituals and things around it, and understanding where the decision point really is.
Mm.
And like for exercise, I was like specifically for exercise, things that really help are if you have a set time in your calendar when you know that you're going to be like you when you know you're going to do it and you're going to be in the spot for it, or if you're going to meet someone there, or if it's an activity you love, those three things, if you do one of those three things, you're more likely to follow through. If you do two of those things, you're going to follow through. All three, of course.
Mm.
So it's looking at your the decision to follow through on an action or a habit is not. It happens usually hours, days, sometimes even weeks before you're actually doing the activity. And that's what I see is the key to successful habit change. One of them.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I was looking down because I was trying to find this quote, which I'm totally going to butcher it. John Mark Comer is somebody that I follow, and he said something along the lines of like, you have to build a life architecture that aligns with your deepest desires. And
Yeah.
I loved that idea of like building an architecture of our daily habits is an architecture of our life. And what it, you have to ask your questions. What are my deepest desires? What do I want? And I think that kind of goes with what you're saying. We have to know these things to then continuously build upon. And this idea that it is a building, like we are building towards something. Who are we building for? And like, what is the why behind some of these habits that we want to change? And what where will I be in a year if I actually do live out these daily habits that I want to implement now? How will my deepest desires come up, and how will I be able to live those out? So I just thought that was so good. There was also another quote of somebody, I can't remember her name right now, but she said something like, "Am I living? Um, is the life I'm living the life that longs to live in me?" Or lead like so this idea of like what am I doing on a daily basis to live out like what I really believe my purpose is, or the things that I want to accomplish, um, and how important it is that we are looking at the habits of our day to be able to move forward in that and just continuously grow. So I don't know if that one made sense. I think I really butchered that quote. But I love this idea. It's kind of been rocking my world, daily habits and how important they are, and just the reminder too of just the small, like it might feel so small, but when we look back, we can see the profound effect of like some of these things that we do on a daily basis and how they form us and shape us. And so even that, like I think there's something to looking at some of the habits that we have created and what have they done, who have they created us to be, and be able to move forward looking at the new habits that we want to create, and yeah, look forward to this new development as a person because of them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely an element of creating. I love that, creating architecture and looking at what good architecture does. Is it naturally flows energy mindfully, meaningfully into design spaces, designed interactions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it takes. I mean, this world needs more empathy. It needs people who are aware, looking to create structural change, like societal structural change, to address some of these endemic problems. And I know coaching is a part of it. It's a part of it. And so what I see is, it does feel like more pressure, but sometimes it's helpful too, to think of this like I have the privilege to structure my life in a way that provides value and is of service to larger societal structural change.
Mm-hmm.
And when I ask myself that question, the usual stressors of how does this relate to me? Am I going to, be successful, good enough, be enough, be okay? All these questions become secondary. They're simply not as interesting as am I using my life in a way that I feel like I was born to do this work? And that feeling of I'm born to do this work, I'm working in service of other, I'm working to further social justice, I'm working to create structural change both in my life and then family's life and then society's life. It's like this, it's this ever broadening ripple. And in this space, I remember being in this space and the importance of holding a vision for what you want to achieve in your own life and the lives of others, and what the change you want to see in the world. Holding that vision becomes so valuable because that vision starts to become stronger, more interesting, almost more tangible than present setbacks. Present tense setbacks become something that provides learning along the way to that larger goal. Doesn't mean it's easy. Doesn't mean it's hard. Doesn't mean I get stressed out and go doomy and gloomy. I can do it good as anyone. And but there's a certain push from living that mission-based life of asking how can I incorporate this feedback and get better. And there's a certain belief in that I think coaching, it just permeates through all of coaching. Yeah, it's amazing when you're in it and you see people who are new to these concepts, new to training, and just feel and touch that yes again, And I know running this organization, I try to get into those classes, but wow, it's a lot. And when I get in there, I savor it. It reminds me of why I'm in this profession. I believe in it now today more than ever. Like we are, coaching is a part of the progress, and I'm just feeling really fortunate to be a part of it.
Yeah, that zeal of the 1.0 coaches, and I'm like, yes, get it,
Mm-hmm.
keep it going. But no, I agree. I mean, it's rocked. I say this all the time. It's rocked my world. Coaching has really changed my life, and even more so now than ever too. When I look at where I was before implementing life coach training into my life and my workspace, it's like wow. Like I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful, and I know so many more people because of it. Like that's interesting. It's expanded just even that the connection with others, and so yeah, John, this is cool. Thank you for
Yeah.
this time today.
Yeah, you too, Ashley. You're amazing. It's fun to riff and
Yeah.
have you cue these things up. It's lovely. Thank you. And thank you, community, for being a part of this. Really, truly, it's, when I first found coaching, I just knew that this was it. This is going to be the future of communication. And for all those new coaches out there or people who are starting crafting that vision and finding ways to remind yourself of that vision is essential. And there'll come a moment you keep taking action steps forward, but you will feel like you're living those goals. And it won't feel like the first time. It will feel like you're living a memory of a dream. And when that happens, it's like this feeling of utter certainty that you were born to do this work. And that's what I wish people, that's what I want my children to feel and everyone to feel, is that feeling of, I was born to do this work. And you know it if you're there. You know if you have it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. This is super fun. And thanks, community, for listening and being a part of this. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.